I have two brief questions I'd like to ask, if I may.
Hi, welcome to Left Foot Media. My name is Brendan Malone and you're watching The Daily Question. Before I get into today's question of the day, just a quick update. I have now set up a PayPal account for Left Foot Media. So to those of you who are already supporting this channel on Patreon, a huge thank you. You guys are awesome. I couldn't do this and couldn't keep producing this level of content without your support. To those of you who want to support me in another way, you can now do that. You can use PayPal instead if you don't want to use the Patreon method of supporting this channel. Anyone can do that at any time, one-off or regular donations. It's totally up to you. The link for both PayPal and Patreon are found in the video description at the bottom of this video. Right, without any further ado, today's question of the day: was Empire Strikes Back as hated as The Last Jedi is? Now, the reason I'm asking that question is because more and more I am seeing people making the claim that The Empire Strikes Back, when it was first released, was hugely divisive. It divided the fan base, it wasn't well received, and therefore, just like The Empire Strikes Back, because The Last Jedi has also been a hugely divisive film that has not been well received, if we just give it a bit of time, people will come to view The Last Jedi the same way we now view Empire Strikes Back, and people will come to realise that The Last Jedi is actually a truly great film, and it's one of the best Star Wars films that's ever been made. Now, there's no doubting that The Empire Strikes Back is easily the best Star Wars film ever made. It is also easily one of the best movies that has ever been released. And it's debatable as to whether or not it's actually the best sequel that was ever released. It's probably a hot contest between it and The Godfather Part 2. I would say that Empire is a better sequel, but that's just me and my personal bias. So there's no doubting that Empire was a great film. However, there's two truth claims that are basically being made here about The Last Jedi and about Empire Strikes Back. The first is the claim that The Empire Strikes Back was hugely divisive and that people hated it when it was first released. The second claim is that basically, even if this is true, that The Empire was hugely divisive when it was first released, that therefore The Last Jedi is actually also a great film in waiting. And if we just give it a bit of time, it's going to become one of those great movies that's going to be seen as one of the best Star Wars films ever made. But are either of these two claims true? Well, the first claim, that the Empire was hugely divisive, I think this is a highly questionable claim. When I keep asking people to provide evidence, they point to the same one or two articles, and those articles might reference critical reviews of The Empire Strikes Back that weren't so favourable, or more commonly, they're actually just sort of very mixed reviews. They don't have strong angst against the film, they're just sort of mixed on it. But even those times where you point to like a handful of critical reviews where they pan the film, we shouldn't be surprised by that. Every film, no matter how good it is always going to have a group of critics and a group of fans who are going to say, I don't like this film. Why? Because it's a form of art and there is a certain subjectivity involved in the reception of any form of art. That's just natural. No film, no matter how good it is ever going to escape that problem. So the idea that somehow this points to a major division just is nonsense. It's not really backed up by the evidence I'm seeing brought forth. Secondly, I was actually there when Empire Strikes Back was released. Now, it's one of the first films that I ever went to see in a theatre. It's one of my earliest childhood memories, actually, of actually being in a theatre and seeing that film. It really resonated with me. Now, to be fair, I was only 5 years old at the time, so it's not like I'm going to have a great sort of social awareness about what's going on in wider society, but I remember the hype that surrounded that film and what happened subsequently, and there is absolutely no doubt as I got older and more mature and was able to grasp what was happening in the world around me, that there was ever any sense that there was this major popular division about this film at all. In fact, I remember the merchandising sales were just through the roof on Empire Strikes Back. I remember everyone, we all wanted the pillowcases, we wanted the shirts, we wanted the toys. I remember being quite jealous of a friend of mine down the road who had the Empire Strikes Back snowtroopers with their little laser cannon on a tripod. I remember the double LP, the soundtrack LP, just listening to that over and over and over again. And of course, there was great anticipation when The Return of the Jedi came out. I don't remember there ever being anywhere near the backlash or the division that some people are claiming that Empire Strikes Back had. I don't remember that at all. And when I go looking for evidence of that, I just don't see that in any great quantity, or certainly not enough evidence to say, yep, there was a major division here. All I see are isolated reviews where certain people didn't appreciate the film at the time. And as I said, that's not unusual. The second claim, though, is that even if we could show actual substantial proof that The Empire Strikes Back was a hugely divisive film that was absolutely panned and the fans hated it when it was released, there was major division amongst the fan base about it, does that also therefore automatically mean that The Last Jedi is a great Star Wars film in waiting? If you just add the magic ingredient of time, all of a sudden people will come to their senses and realise how great this film is. Well, no, it doesn't mean that at all. There are plenty of films you can point to which are terrible films because they are terrible films, and no amount of time is ever going to change that fact or all of a sudden change people's minds and have them start thinking that it's a great film. So, for example, The Room is a terrible movie. People now go to that film. It's got a popular cult following because people go to the film to laugh at the film. They don't go to the film to laugh or to participate in the story. They go to laugh at that film, right? That has not, the passage of time has not turned that into a great movie. The Happening by M. Night Shyamalan. That was one of the first films where I ever walked out of the movie theatre so angry I wanted my money back. Critics panned it. Fans of M. Night panned that film, and rightly so. And it hasn't got any better with the passage of time. Movie 43, terrible film, panned by the critics. Not a huge popular reception. Why? Because it was a rubbish film. You cannot add time to any of those movies and suddenly make them great. And I would argue that The Last Jedi, while it's not in that category of badness, it's more competently made than that. It is that same sort of type of film in the sense that adding time is not going to turn The Last Jedi into a great or well-received sort of film. This is not a Shawshank Redemption in waiting. It just isn't, because this is not a good film. Even people who are writing articles staunchly defending The Last Jedi are also admitting in those articles that there are big problems and flaws in this film, like the cringeworthy Mary Poppins scene with Princess Leia. Even diehard fans are saying that that was a terrible scene in that film. So there are things about The Last Jedi, the flaws in the writing and the structure of that film and the way the characters were handled, the way the story was told, that are not going to go away. That is not at all like Empire Strikes Back. You can look at the absolute difference in the response, the box office response, to the subsequent follow-up films to both The Empire Strikes Back and The Last Jedi. So The Last Jedi was followed up by Solo, a Star Wars story, and what happened? Solo, a Star Wars story, was a box office flop. Now, why did that happen? It happened because the fans were so divided and so angry about The Last Jedi that they did not show up. They voted with their feet. They did not turn out to the cinemas and hand over their hard-earned cash because they were so upset about The Last Jedi. Now, that did not happen with Return of the Jedi. Return of the Jedi was a huge success, and the franchise was at its pinnacle at that point. People were waiting with bated breath. There was great anticipation. I remember being there. And there was only a 3-year gap between those two films, and people were waiting with anticipation for that next film. There was no angst. There was no division at all, which is why I don't believe for a second that this claim that there was some sort of major division. I just don't. I never saw it. Certainly wasn't what was shown in the box office, whereas we can point to what's happened with Solo to show that in actual fact the division is real and there is something very, very different going on right now. And you can see the way in which people are talking about this on social media, that something very, very different is going on right now. And no amount of time is going to change that fact. No amount of time is suddenly going to make this a better film. Even though it's sold well on home box office, home theatre release, that still doesn't change the fact that it hasn't all of a sudden become like, say, The Shawshank Redemption, which is now and became a cult classic once it was made available on home theatre release, right? That hasn't happened with this film. This film is still hugely divisive. In fact, it's more common to see people going back to the film a second time and they're still upset about it, or even people who say that they've realised the second time around that there were flaws in it that they missed the first time. So no, adding time is not going to make this a great film, and there's absolutely no way that you can compare The Empire Strikes Back and The Last Jedi. They are not two equal quality films at all. One is a far inferior knockoff of the other. And I don't think you need to be a rocket scientist, and I don't need to tell you and spell it out clearly which one is the inferior knockoff. As per usual, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so please let me know what you think in the comment section below. And if you like the content I'm creating and you'd like to see more of it, then please support me on PayPal and Patreon. Both of the links for those two things are in the video description below. That's right, I can hear my theme music too. I'll see you tomorrow on The Daily Question.